The cafe sat at the edge of the city, nestled between a bookstore that smelled of old paper and an apothecary filled with dried herbs and mystery. Its neon sign flickered, a remnant of a more ambitious past, casting faint blue hues onto the sidewalk where Luna Evans stood. She pushed open the door, letting the scent of freshly ground coffee wrap around her like a familiar hug. Luna wasn't extraordinary. She was a 23-year-old art student who spent too much time in coffee shops sketching strangers and too little time studying for exams. Her curly auburn hair fell in unruly waves, framing her pale face, and her hazel eyes carried the perpetual weight of curiosity. Life had always felt a little too big for her, but she navigated it with a quiet resilience that made her charming in a forgettable sort of way. She found her usual spot by the window, where the rain streaked the glass in erratic patterns. People moved past in the outside world, faceless, hurried figures with places to be and people to impress. Luna liked watching them, imagining their lives, their secrets. It made the world feel smaller, more manageable. The cafe had its regulars, the barista with the sleeve of tattoos and tired eyes, the elderly man who read the newspaper like it contained the meaning of life, and the couple who argued in hushed tones over espresso. But today, there was someone new. He sat in the farthest booth, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that contrasted with his oddly pale skin. His eyes, a shade of deep violet, darted over a holographic data pad, and his fingers twitched with a precision Luna found fascinating. He seemed out of place, too refined for the worn wooden tables, too still for the bustling energy of the cafe. Luna wasn't one to approach strangers, but something about him piqued her interest. Perhaps it was the way he held himself, like a man accustomed to command yet burdened by solitude. Or maybe it was the way he glanced around, as if expecting to be noticed, but dreading the attention. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, balancing her sketchbook in one hand and a coffee in the other. The man blinked, his expression carefully neutral. "If you wish," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an undertone of something Luna couldn't quite place. Something old, something vast. She slid into the seat across from him, flipping open her sketchbook. "You look like you're waiting for someone." "Perhaps I am," he replied cryptically, his eyes flicking to her drawing with mild interest. Luna smirked. "Or maybe you're just hoping someone interesting will come along." He studied her for a moment, and Luna swore she saw the corners of his lips twitch into the ghost of a smile. "And do you consider yourself interesting?" She laughed lightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not particularly, but I like interesting things." The man regarded her with an intensity that made her feel momentarily exposed. "Then you are already more interesting than most." Luna tilted her head, tapping her pencil against the sketchbook. "You talk like you're from another time." His gaze darkened for a split second before he replied, "Perhaps I am." There was something in his words, a weight that didn't match the mundanity of a rainy afternoon in a corner cafe. Luna decided not to press, not yet anyway. The rain continued to fall outside, and inside, the air was thick with the aroma of coffee and the hum of quiet conversations. Luna doodled absent-mindedly, letting the stranger's presence settle like a comfortable silence. In another universe, this might have been a fleeting moment, an ordinary girl sharing a table with an odd man. But Luna had a way of stumbling into the extraordinary, even if she didn't know it yet. And as for the man across from her, the so-called lonely stranger, well, he was something else entirely. He was a galactic emperor, ruler of 1,000 worlds, and architect of destinies that stretched beyond human comprehension. But for now, he was just someone in a cafe, sipping tea and wondering why this young human girl wasn't afraid to talk to him. Luna sipped her coffee, the heat tracing a path down her throat, grounding her in the present moment. Across from her, the stranger held his cup with an elegance that seemed effortless, as if every motion were rehearsed over countless lifetimes. She watched his long fingers curl around the ceramic, steady and deliberate. There was something almost ritualistic about it, like he found comfort in small, measured actions. The cafe buzzed with quiet chatter, the clink of spoons against porcelain, the low hum of conversations punctuated by bursts of laughter. It was a familiar melody, one that usually lulled Luna into a state of calm observation. But today, the stranger's presence disrupted the usual rhythm, introducing a note of discord she couldn't quite ignore. "You come here often?" she asked, setting her sketchbook aside. He looked up, his violet eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "No. Today is an exception." Luna tilted her head, considering him. What made today special? For a moment, he didn't answer. Instead, he gazed out the rain-streaked window, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to see something different." She followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual, just the ordinary chaos of city life. "Well, you picked the right place. Different is pretty much my brand." A flicker of amusement crossed his features, brief but unmistakable. "Is that so?" "Oh yeah," Luna grinned, leaning forward conspiratorially. "I mean, how many people do you know who spend their free time sketching total strangers?" He studied her, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "Few. Fewer still who do so with such curiosity." Luna rolled her eyes. "Curiosity's just a fancy word for being nosy." The stranger chuckled softly, the sound low and unfamiliar in the space between them. "And yet, curiosity is the foundation of understanding." Something in his tone made Luna pause. There was a weight to his words, as if they carried more than their surface meaning. She tapped her fingers against the table thoughtfully. "So, what do you do? Or is that classified information?" He hesitated, the faintest shadow crossing his expression. "Let us say I govern." "Govern? Like politics?" She wrinkled her nose playfully. "That sounds exhausting." He offered a small nod. "It can be." There was something detached about the way he spoke, as if the concept of exhaustion were theoretical to him. Luna couldn't help but wonder if his life really was as distant and enigmatic as he made it seem. "Well," she said, reaching for her pencil again, "whatever it is you do, you should take a break more often. Cafes are good for the soul." The stranger watched her carefully, his lips pressed into a contemplative line. "Perhaps you are right." Outside, the rain softened into a gentle drizzle, and inside, Luna continued sketching, her pencil moving with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in their own company. The stranger remained across from her, his eyes lingering on the paper, but his mind, Luna suspected, was somewhere far, far away. The hours passed unnoticed, measured only by the gradual cooling of Luna's coffee and the shifting tides of conversation within the cafe. Outside, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement, painting fleeting illusions that dissolved with each step of hurried pedestrians. Luna traced the rim of her cup absent-mindedly, stealing glances at the man across from her. He seemed caught in some invisible current of thought, his expression distant but composed. "You know, most people don't just sit and stare like that," she mused, twirling her pencil between slender fingers. "It makes you stand out." His violet eyes flickered to her, a faint smirk tugging at the edges of his lips. "Is that a bad thing?" "Not necessarily," Luna admitted, her brow furrowing. "But it does make you a mystery. And people don't really like mysteries. They prefer things they can explain." He regarded her carefully, as if weighing her words. "And you? Do you seek explanations? Or do you find comfort in the unknown?" Luna leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "I guess a little of both. The unknown is exciting, but it's also overwhelming. Sometimes it helps to have something solid to hold on to." The man nodded, his fingers lightly tapping against the table in a rhythmic pattern, a silent echo of thoughts too vast for words. There are worlds where mystery is all that exists, where certainty is a fleeting illusion. Luna's gaze sharpened. That sounds oddly poetic. Where'd you come up with that? Experience, he said simply, offering no further elaboration. She studied him for a long moment, her artistic instincts itching to capture the sharp angles of his face, the way his eyes seemed to hold the weight of distant stars. There was something timeless about him, something that didn't quite belong in a place as ordinary as this cafe. So, she said finally, her voice laced with curiosity, if you could go anywhere, absolutely anywhere in the universe, where would you go? His gaze drifted past her, as if searching through memories too vast to recount. Perhaps somewhere quieter, where the burdens of governance do not reach. Luna laughed softly. Governance again. You really are some kind of diplomat, huh? Or maybe a secret king. Her tone was teasing, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't too far from the truth. Something like that, he replied, his expression enigmatic. A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the soft hum of the cafe. Luna found herself feeling oddly at ease with him, as if she'd known him far longer than she actually had. There was a gravity to him, a quiet force that pulled at her curiosity. You know, she said, breaking the silence, for someone who wanted to see something different today, you're doing a great job of blending in. His lips twitched in amusement. Perhaps. But appearances can be deceiving. Luna grinned, tapping her pencil against the table. I'll figure you out eventually. The man offered no argument, only a small, knowing nod. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely, leaving behind streets that shimmered under the glow of streetlights. The world outside carried on, oblivious to the quiet revelations taking place inside the little cafe. The warm hum of the cafe seemed to recede as Luna found herself drawn deeper into the presence of the stranger. The conversation had slowed, but the silence was far from empty. She watched him, trying to decipher the quiet weight in his eyes, the way he seemed to carry an entire world, or perhaps more, within him. A sudden burst of laughter from a nearby table jolted her from her thoughts. She glanced over, momentarily reminded that life continued around them. A group of students hunched over their laptops, their screens casting a pale glow onto their faces. A man in a rain-damp trench coat read a tattered paperback novel by the counter, his fingers absently tracing the worn edges of the pages. She turned back to her companion and found him studying her intently. What? She asked, feeling a slight heat rise to her cheeks. You observe much, he said, his voice carrying that same measured quality, deliberate and thoughtful. Most people drift through their lives without noticing the details. Luna shrugged, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. It's kind of my thing. Helps with the art, you know? Seeing beyond what people show on the surface. He nodded, considering her words. And what do you see when you look at me? The question hung in the air between them. Luna hesitated, biting her lip. I see. Someone who's out of place, but pretending not to be. Someone who's important, but maybe not in the way people think. A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, crossed his features. An insightful observation. Yeah, well, I've had a lot of practice, she replied lightly, though there was an undercurrent of sincerity in her voice. He leaned back slightly, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup with a strange, almost mechanical precision. Importance is often subjective. One person's burden can be another's freedom. Luna tilted her head, intrigued. So you're saying you're important, but you don't want to be? A shadow passed over his expression. I am saying that roles are not always chosen. There was something about the way he said it that made Luna pause. She could feel the weight behind his words, as if they carried an entire history she couldn't begin to comprehend. She wanted to ask more, to peel back the layers, but instinct told her to tread carefully. Instead, she offered a small, lopsided smile. "Well, in this cafe, you're just some guy drinking tea with a girl who asks too many questions. No titles, no roles. Just now." For the first time since they had met, his expression softened in a way that felt almost human. "Just now," he echoed, as if testing the words. The moment stretched between them, delicate and fleeting, until Luna's phone buzzed, pulling her abruptly back into reality. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "Looks like I've got to head out soon. Real world calls." He inclined his head. The real world is persistent in that way. Luna grinned, standing and tucking her sketchbook under her arm. "But hey, this was fun. Maybe I'll see you around." He offered her a small, enigmatic smile. Perhaps. As she stepped toward the door, she felt his gaze lingering on her, as if he were committing her to memory. And as she disappeared into the city beyond, she couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from over. The next time Luna saw him, it wasn't in a cafe. It was on the crowded city streets, under the flickering neon of a late-night convenience store. He stood apart from the rushing bodies, perfectly still, like a statue carved from marble and moonlight. Something about him, the way he existed in the periphery, made her pause mid-step. "You lost?" she asked, half smiling as she approached. He looked at her with the same unshakable calm, his violet eyes reflecting the gaudy glow of the store sign. "No," he said simply, but there was something behind his tone, something that suggested otherwise. Luna shifted the weight of her shopping bag, studying him with quiet curiosity. "You didn't strike me as the midnight snack type. There are things one must experience firsthand," he said, his gaze drifting toward the store window where shelves of brightly colored snacks sat in neat, artificial rows. She grinned. "You're in for a treat, then. Ever had a Cosmic Blast candy bar? It'll change your life." He regarded her with something bordering amusement. "Change my life. It's the little things that do it," she said, holding the door open for him. He hesitated, then stepped inside, the overhead fluorescent lights casting harsh angles across his features. Luna led him through the aisles, picking up items at random. "So, where have you been hiding? I thought you were one of those creatures of habit types." He observed the shelves with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "I have been attending to obligations." "Ah," she said knowingly. "Important, mysterious obligations, I bet." He didn't deny it, instead selecting a package of instant noodles and turning it over in his hands like it held the secrets of the universe. The weight of responsibility is not so easily set aside. Luna paused, leaning against the shelf. "Sounds heavy." "It is," he admitted quietly. For a moment they stood there, him with his distant stare, her with an easy, grounding presence. "You know," Luna said, "there's something freeing about cheap food and bad lighting. It makes the world feel smaller." "Smaller," he echoed, as if trying the word on for size. She tapped the edge of a candy bar against his arm. "Consider it a break from all that responsibility. Even galactic emperors need snack breaks." His eyes flickered to hers, a strange, unreadable look crossing his face. "Galactic emperor. I mean, I don't know what you do," she shrugged, "but you've got the vibe of someone carrying the weight of a million worlds." "Just saying." He let out a breath. Was it a laugh? So soft she almost missed it. "Perhaps you are not so far off." Luna raised an eyebrow but said nothing, instead tossing a bag of chips into his hands. "Come on, let's pay before they think we're weird." As they left the store, the neon lights painting streaks across the wet pavement, Luna wondered if she'd stumbled onto something far bigger than she was prepared for. And for the first time, the thought didn't scare her. It thrilled her. Luna didn't expect the revelation to come in the form of a quiet conversation under a flickering street lamp. But then again, nothing about him had been predictable. The two of them stood in the glow of the artificial light, the city humming around them, and she realized the truth had been there all along. Hidden in his careful words, his distant stares, the way he carried himself with the gravity of someone who had seen too much. "You weren't joking, were you?" she asked, her voice low but steady. "About the responsibility thing? About everything?" He met her gaze with an honesty that left no room for doubt. "No," he said simply. "I am what you suspect. More, even." Luna swallowed, her pulse quickening. "And you're here. Why? What does a galactic emperor want with late-night snack runs and small talk?" He studied her for a long moment before answering. "Because there are things I cannot understand from afar. And because, sometimes, even an emperor wishes to be no one." The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Luna shifted, shoving her hands into her pockets. "So what happens now? Do you go back to ruling entire star systems? Pretending this didn't happen?" He looked away, his expression unreadable. "I must return, but I will not forget. And if I could stay, I would." A pang of something sharp twisted in her chest. "But you can't." "No." He took a step closer, and for the first time, Luna saw the vulnerability beneath the regal exterior, the weariness, the longing for something simpler. "You have shown me a world beyond my own. For that, I am grateful." She exhaled a soft laugh, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. "Well, hey, if you ever need another snack run, you know where to find me." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Perhaps I will." A distant hum filled the air, subtle yet unmistakable. Luna recognized it instinctively, even though she'd never heard it before. The sound of something beyond Earth, beyond comprehension. He turned slightly, as if listening to a call only he could hear. "It's time, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded, his gaze lingering on her. "Yes." Luna squared her shoulders, offering a crooked smile despite the ache in her chest. "Then go be important, Your Majesty. Just don't forget the little people." He reached out, the briefest touch of his hand against hers, a silent promise. And then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, leaving only the quiet hum of something not quite human behind. Luna stood there for a long time, staring after him. Eventually, she sighed, adjusting the weight of her shopping bag, and headed home. The city around her felt both smaller and infinitely larger all at once. And though he was gone, she had the unshakable feeling that their paths would cross again, in some distant place, under different stars.